Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I apologize for the late start, but I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting of Finance Committee to order. As is customary, we will start with prayer. I ask you if you would pray with me at this time. Heavenly Father, we are grateful for the time that is ours this morning to gather here as we examine the budget of our country for the following 2 years. Father, this morning I pray that you will bless our deliberations and all that we say and do. May we, as we examine these and ask questions and solicit answers, I pray, Father, that we will do with an air of decorum, of respect for each other. And I pray, Father, and thank you too for all of the civil servants that are here to participate in providing an elucidation to a number of these appropriations that we are examining. Give us wisdom, Father, to always seek to do what's best for our country. We ask you to bless our deliberations at this time. In Jesus' name, amen. Please be seated. This morning, the House is now in committee stage, specifically Finance Committee. And the purpose of this meeting this morning is to review and hopefully approve all of the requested appropriations shown on the schedule to the bill for the 2020 and 21 financial years. Before we begin the formal part of our examination of the appropriations, I would like to read a statement of relevance to our deliberations. Okay. I had hoped to do so this morning when the House itself was, but as we had concluded the debate on Monday evening, I think it's appropriate that I make the statement at this time. It was almost 10 years ago that the government of the Cayman Islands executed a 10-year, $312 million or US dollar or 261.3 million CI dollar bullet bond with a maturity date of the 24th of November 2019. The bond carried a coupon or interest rate of 5.95% per annum with interest payable every 6 months. This coming Friday, November 22nd, 2019, the government will fully repay this US $312 million bond, but the interest thereon will be accrued and paid up to the 24th of November, being a Sunday. The imminent repayment is significant for 3 reasons. First, it shall be made wholly from government's existing bank account balances. Secondly, its magnitude. And lastly, it results in a substantial reduction in the public debt of the Cayman Islands. Whilst the government is able to repay the bond from its own cash reserves, it is financially prudent to enhance our cash reserves subsequent to the 24th of November so that we do not put government's compliance with the requirements of the Framework for Fiscal Responsibility in jeopardy. Indeed, the Legislative Assembly on the 15th of November 2017 authorized the government to borrow CI $153 million in 2019 to bolster its cash balances following the repayment of the bond issue. On September 13, 2019, government made its financing needs publicly known via its Central Procurement Office's procurement portal, Bonfire, when it issued a request for proposals. The main requirements of the government for the satisfaction of its financing needs were funding in the amount of $153 million approved by this Honourable House, a 15-year amortizing loan, a fixed rate of interest for the entire 15-year duration, and the ability to make prepayments of loan principal without incurring penalties. Via an open and public procurement process, 4 financial institutions submitted financing proposals for government's considerations by the deadline of October 14th. The 4 submissions were subsequently evaluated by the Ministry of Finance's Entity Procurement Committee and by the Public Procurement Committee. The evaluation resulted in the submission by the bank, Butterfield Bank Cayman Limited, being accepted as a successful bidder. The key features of the successful bid are as follows: a fixed rate of interest for the loan's entire 15-year duration of 3.25% per annum, an ability to make prepayments of loan principal repayments without penalty, and a 15-year amortizing period. Bearing in mind that the current prime rate in the Cayman Islands is 4.75%, the offer of financing at 3.25% fixed for 15 years underscores the financial confidence that is held in government and the very competitive nature of the tendering process. Government is confident that the loan financing offer, which has been accepted, represents the best options of the submissions received, and the accepted submission meets the requirements specified by government. On behalf of the government, I express our gratitude to the 4 institutions that made loan financing submissions for our consideration, and I congratulate Butterfield Bank on being the successful bidder. Thank you all.
Mr. Chairman, you're going to take questions on this statement, or do we deal with it during the Finance Committee?
We can deal with it in Finance Committee, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Colleagues, the 4 budget documents that were tabled on the 8th of November in the House were not approved by the House, nor were we expected to do so in Finance Committee. The purpose of those documents is to provide information about the amounts shown in the schedule to the bill. This additional information, along with answers to be provided by the civil service and public servants, will then allow honourable members to make decisions with respect to items on the bill's schedule. To assist my honourable members in their review of the appropriations shown in the schedule to the bill, the Ministry of Finance has prepared another document, essentially the appropriation bill itself, along with an added column which provides a cross-reference to the page numbers in the Plan and Estimates document, where further information can be found on the items shown in the schedule to the bill. Now, the basis upon which Finance Committee is in session is in accordance with Standing Orders 63.3 and 75.1. The quorum of Finance Committee is 10 members, excluding the chairman of the committee, myself as the Minister of Finance. Now, given the situation that government must conclude Finance Committee's proceedings, Finance Committee's report must be presented to the House. The House also has to consider the 3rd reading of the bill. Administrative work by the LA staff must occur to prepare the bill for assent by His Excellency the Governor. The bill must be assented to by the Governor, and the appropriation law has to be gazetted no later than the 31st of December 2019. So that there is an appropriation law in place on the 1st of January 2020, the start of the fiscal year. I respectfully request and ask for members' cooperation in the following ways. Members, please ask your questions promptly and do not make long introductory preambles to questions. This is the most important aspect of cooperation I'm seeking from honourable members today. I know from past committee proceedings that members will wish to explain why they're asking questions, but such explanations need to be very brief. I make this request each time Finance Committee is convened. If questions are briefly put, time will allow for more questions to be asked, as opposed to asking a few questions due to the time being taken up with long introductory remarks that come before a question. I don't believe it would be in the spirit of mutual cooperation to set a limit on the number of questions each member can ask on an appropriation. Here are some important housekeeping procedures to observe during our proceedings of this Finance Committee. Questions and answers must be posed and provided through me, the Chairman of Finance Committee. Finance Committee and the Chairman's decisions must be respected. My apologies, I'm getting ahead of myself. This enables the conduct of the committee to be much orderly and efficient. Excessive banter and direct talk across the floor bypassing the chairman should not occur. To be fair, both sides have done this in the past, and throughout the deliberations of the committee, a tremendous amount of time is lost because of this. I shall be adhering strictly to the duration of breaks and start times. For me, 1 hour means an hour, and 9:30 a.m. means 9:30 a.m. As soon as a quorum is obtained, I shall start the deliberations of the committee, and as it is observed in the House that the Speaker's ruling shall apply, so too in Finance Committee, the Chairman's decisions must be respected. I will always make my best efforts to be judicious and fair to everyone. We undoubtedly will have to work beyond 5 p.m. on most days, and I will do my very best to let members know as early as possible at the start of each day the working hours for that day. And I will tell you now, we shall be working to at least 8 o'clock this evening. In terms of the approval for items on the schedule to the bill, in accordance with Standing Order 64.3, I shall ask members' approval for a particular item by posing the question. All those in favor of, and I will state the name of the particular appropriation and its amount, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye, and those against, no. Once all of the appropriations on the schedule to the bill have been considered and voted upon by the committee, there are some additional closing procedural considerations that the committee must also vote on. These include Standing Order 64.4, which seeks a decision from the committee as to whether the schedule to the bill stands part of the bill. Second, Standing Order 64.5 requires the committee to determine whether the clauses to the bill do stand part of the bill. And Standing Order 64.7 requires the committee to vote on the question as to whether the bill be reported to the House. Before we consider the appropriations shown in the schedule to the bill, I wish to remind all honourable members that in accordance with Standing Order 64.1, the clauses to the bill stand postponed until after the consideration of the appropriations on the schedule to the bill has been completed. Once this is done, we shall revert to the clauses of the bill. Honourable members, I would like the committee to consider the appropriations on the schedule to the bill by starting with those appropriations to the Honourable Deputy Premier with respect to the Ministry of District Administration and Tourism and Transport, followed by a consideration of the appropriations to the Ministry of Financial Services. The first output group sought for the Honourable Deputy Premier is DAT1, Advice and Support for the Minister of District Administration, for the amounts of $4,001,067 for 2020 and $4,034,274 for 2021, details of which are found on page 88 of the Plan and Estimates document, and also found on page 16 of the document that I referred to being the appropriation bill with the page numbers there appended thereto. So if you turn to page 16 of the document that was given out this morning, you will find all of the appropriations to the Minister for District Administration, Tourism and Transport. So we begin with DAT1, and we put the matter now out for questions. Member from East End.
Mr. Chairman, I noted that in your opening statement, you referred to civil servants answering questions. That has become the norm in this Finance Committee over the last few years, which is not what is required. Ministers are required to answer questions. And I would respectfully ask that we consider that because it's only in the last maybe 10 years that I've seen a proliferation of that. And really, civil servants don't answer to the members of parliament. It's the ministers who do that.
Well, member from Northside, I take your point, and I think...
Beg your pardon, sir.
Member for East End.
I have some questions on it, though, so thank you for recognizing that the red light came on.
Member for East End, I accept that it should be the ministers that should answer to the House with regard to these things. However, as I think we've all experienced here, there are times when the ministers do not have the direct information and best. And so they do ask for consideration of allowing the member of civil servant to explain the situation. But at the end of the day, it is the minister who has to accept responsibility for the answers to these questions.
Mr. Chairman, and I understand that, and that the minister in many cases may not have the intricate detail of to answer, but at the same token, I believe it should go through ministers. It puts us, the members of this legislature, in an untenable situation where we're addressing political matters, policy matters to the civil servants. Now, that must give rise to concerns with relationships between Parliament and the civil service. Well, let me put it this way, Mr. Chairman. It would be in our best interest that we restrict that as much as possible. I think that's about where we can get to this at this stage, having had a practice develop in this country with it.
But member for East End, I don't necessarily agree with you. I think at all times your questions must be directed to the minister, not to a civil servant or to another public official in here.
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm talking about restricting as much as possible the direct questioning of civil servants through you, if we could reduce that as much as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologies to members for arriving later, actually not feeling very well, but obviously I came in at an opportune time. I take cognizance of what the learned leader of the opposition is saying. I can understand from a political perspective why that would be of significance, but certainly from a procedural and a standing order and constitutional perspective, the questions are to be put through the chair, your good self, directed to the minister. The minister has that discretion to then either answer himself or direct it to any member of his staff in order to facilitate, because the modus operandi of this committee is to provide information that is relevant, timely, honest, and has integrity. And if that means asking assistance from your constitutional responsibility to appointed administrative staff, then that is the course that the House has taken. As far as I'm aware, unless the member or anyone else in this honorable House can so direct me to it, there's nothing illegitimate with it. So I take it that the member is expressing a desire which the government would be happy to accommodate, but not so obliged to so do.
Mr. Chairman, I listened to my colleague, again, to my learned colleague on these matters, but certainly she and others will know that the standing orders, Constitution requires all questions to be answered by ministers, posed by members of Parliament. I know we have established a practice in this country particularly in Finance Committee, and I appreciate her interventions on the fact that we need to get the information out as clear and as transparent as possible to the members, and if it requires getting the civil servant to answer it, then that is fine. But still, it is my view that I believe we need to restrict that as much as possible. That is my concern.
Mr. Chair, certainly the government notes the concern, and we believe it's a genuine expressed concern by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, but the government has to carry on the operation of this country with full and frank disclosure, and we believe that we can only do that with assistance of our technical staff. Had that not been the fact, there would have been no reason for Section 55 of the Constitution, or there would be no reason for another staff in the ministry. Ministers could go and operate it, and we'll have an anarchy. Precedent has been set. In fact, I've been here long enough, and so has my good friend from Easton, to where members of the opposition, including myself when I was in opposition, have asked specifically for civil servants to come down. Now, having been here a little bit longer, but the member from Easton is very, very smart when it comes to procedural things and political things. I would hasten to speculate, because I'm entitled to my own opinion, that if I were in the opposition today, I would be asked the same thing, because it's a good budget, and if you put the civil servants here, you'll be going against some 4,000 voters, whereas if you put the politician, you're going against 11. Good move.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to carry this on much further, but it certainly was not a political consideration on my part, and I have been here long enough to know that in cases where the ministers have no knowledge of what has transpired, and I can think of many cases in my many years here. I know one of ICTA that the minister had no knowledge of what was going on, that it was the opposition required that the managing director be brought before this committee, because this committee has the right and the power and the authority to call anyone, whether they're other than the governor, I think it is, that we cannot call. And whether it's ministers of religion, or ministers of foolishness, or ministers of whatever, we can call anyone. And those are the times that should be exercised. It was only out of concern, and I don't want to prolong it. I know the member from Northside is chopping at the bits to get in on this matter as well, so I will just leave it at that, sir.
Thank you. Member from East End. Okay, I've got DAT 1 open for questions.
Mr. Chair, through you, before we get started, considering the fact of your opening statement about the order and fairness of this committee, I think it's important that I note for the record of this committee that the government hasn't given me the constitutional right and Section 47(3) that allows me to meet with cabinet where there isn't representation of Georgetown Central within cabinet to put my inquiries and hopes and desires for my constituency. And allow me to read for the record, Mr. Chair. Section 47(3) says, where an elected district is not represented in cabinet, the member of or members of the Legislative Assembly representing that district shall be entitled to and attend a meeting convened by cabinet once every 3 months for the purposes of A, making representations with respect to matters affecting their district, B, making budgetary representations when the annual plan and estimates are being developed. I wanted to be notified that I've asked the Premier and the Cabinet, through myself personally, as well as through the Leader of Opposition, and have not been given the opportunity to request out of this $2 million budget on behalf of the people of Georgetown Central. 2 billion, my apologies. So I wanted to be notified before we get started that the people of Georgetown Central are not represented, unfortunately, through their representative in this budget. And to make it matter clear, it is unconstitutional not to allow the representatives of the opposition to meet with the cabinet about the budget before it's laid to the House.
Minister.
Mr. Chair, obviously the Honourable Premier will be arriving later, and I would like to reserve his right to respond to that when he arrives, but also for the members for the benefit of those members not aware, it's His Excellency the Governor and the Honourable Premier who sets the agenda for Cabinet, but I'm sure with his ability to eloquently articulate, he'll be more than happy to respond to the member when he arrives.
And Mr. Chairman, so would I, because if he's that eloquent and explaining himself, I'm sure he's very eloquent in responding to my letter for that, with that request too.
Member for Northside.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could bring us back to DAT 1.
Yes, sir. Please start.
I have some questions. The Public Authorities Law has specific requirements for the ministry and chief officer in terms of its interaction with its public authorities under that ministry. I see nothing in the advice and support on DAT 1 that delineates or sets any quality for any such activity. Does this mean that the ministry does not intend to issue any directives or to fulfill its role under the Public Authorities Law during these 2 financial years?
Minister.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the member for the question, and I would like to ask the Chief Officer to answer.
Good morning, Strand Bodden, Chief Officer, Ministry of Tourism. Mr. Chairman, through you, sir, so DAT1 is an output group of outputs. So within DAT1, there is MDT 17, which is oversight of government corporations, statutory authorities, boards, and committee performance, and TOU 2615, which is technical advice and oversight of boards and committees.
Member for Northside.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, under the quality definitions, the penultimate item refers to agenda and minutes accurately reflect board decisions vetted and amended as necessary by the respective boards. This is not an opportunity for the minister to go to meetings after the fact and ask for changes in the minutes. Is it? Is this intended that the ministry is going to ask for minutes to be amended and the ministry is going to vet the minutes? Or is this that it expects the board to accurately do this? Because if that's the case, in response to the last question, that heading is under the wrong word.
Minister.
It is not the ministry's intent to do that.
What then does this quality assurance represent? What activity?
Minister.
Thank you. Again, I'd ask the Chief Officer to answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, the Public Authorities Law, the member is very accurate in terms of what it lays out that the Chief Officer is responsible for in terms of interactions with SAGCs, statutory authorities and government companies. So it is not that to drill down to that extent, but we do have oversight for good governance. And I'll give some examples. So, for instance, in board meetings, we give advice. We don't vote as per the Public Authorities Law, but we do give advice on how to carry out good governance. That could be from anything from recruitment to procurement, just best practice in general of the public service and how it operates. So that's what it refers to. I would also refer to another output that is under the DAT1, which is consultative and secretariat services for boards. That's more boards that don't really have an entity below them, but say, for example, the hotel licensing board and boards like that.
Member for Northside.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the Chief Officer says that it is intended for them to give advice in board meetings. Why are you doing it in a meeting as opposed to doing what I believe the Public Authorities Law requires, is that you issue directives in writing? And is this a case where you expect that because you represent a greater authority and is responsible for the appointments of board members, that your advice will be taken as gospel?
Can you ask that question again through the chair?
The question is, Mr. Chairman, is why is it being done at the board meeting by the ministry as opposed to doing what I believe the Public Authorities Law requires, is that such directives or advice is given in writing, so there's a record of the advice or directive that is given, and whether it is done at the board level because they believe that being the person responsible for the appointment of board members, their advice will be considered gospel.
If I could invite, through you, Mr. Chair, the member to look at page 88, under quality. It says, agenda and minutes accurately reflect board decisions, vetted and amended as necessary by respective board.
My question, concern on that is, you are determining whether the board meetings are accurate and reflect the board decisions, and then you are requesting the board to alter them to suit your definition of accuracy. Because minutes should be approved by the board itself, vetted by the board, and approved by the board. Second question is, when does this take place? Before minutes are approved or after minutes are approved by the board?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't moved past the board. If you look at the agenda, minutes accurately reflect board decisions, vetted and amended as necessary by the respective board.
Mr. Chairman, with the greatest of respect, you're not answering the question. That is an expectation of a board. The board itself is supposed to accurately represent in the minutes the decisions of the board, and there's a process of minute correction and minute approval. Why is it necessary for the ministry to have the authority, and my question is, what is it here unless you are requesting the board to make certain changes to the minutes to reflect what you determine as accurate? We're talking about good governance and specific.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, I think I understand what the member is asking, and I thank him for the question. The answer to that is not the intention of the ministry. The responsibility, as we all know under best practice, is for the board to act. If there is an issue, the minutes should accurately reflect the board decisions. And if it needs to be amended, the procedure is at the next meeting, when they review and approve the minutes from the previous meeting, they would then correct. If it had to be corrected, it'd be vetted by the respective board. The intention, as you have asked, is not the intention of the ministry. The ministry's intention is to work under best practice.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, has there been any instance where the ministry has had to vet minutes and ask the board to correct it? Last 2 years, and last budget period.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Are there any instances during this current budget period, 2 years, where the ministry has had in vetting minutes have to ask the board to make corrections or changes?
No. Not that I know anything about. Through you, Mr. Chair.
To you, Mr. Chairman, how does the ministry communicate policy directives to its boards?
Through you, Mr. Chair, through the chief officer.
How does the chief officer direct policy to the boards?
I'll ask the chief officer to respond to that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. As the minister has said in his previous answer, he would give me the policy directive. I would then speak to the board at a board meeting. Now, I don't attend, this ministry has quite a number of boards. I don't attend every board meeting, but I would speak to my nominee that would then speak to the board on a policy directive from the minister. The minister would also be able to speak directly to a nominee that always attends a board meeting.
So there is no written record of policy directives to boards. It's all done verbally by you or your representative at the board meeting.
If it was a directive given at a board meeting, it would be minuted, and then it'd be approved at the next board meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have the public authorities law in front of me, but there used to be an old senior civil servant who used to tell us if it's not in writing, it didn't exist. So policy decisions by the ministry are never in written form to the board. It is always done verbally at a board meeting, and the authority for that board to operate that policy is totally relied on by a record in the minutes. And are your minutes verbatim, or are your minutes summaries of decisions?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the ministry has written policy for each one of the statutory authorities, and there are also times when discussions take place about policy that is given verbally. Verbally, it would be reflected in the minutes of that authority.
So, Mr. Chairman, how does the ministry monitor the implementation of a policy by a specific board?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've been through this before. The chief officer has explained that either himself or his designate attend the board meetings, and they look at the policy directives at the board meeting if they're being carried out, and obviously they look at the results.
So, I'm waiting on the minister, he's reading something. You don't want to add anything to that answer based on what you're reading. So, Mr. Chairman, let me see if I can give an example. In the instance of the airport authority and the development of the new airport, is there a written record of the policy authorizing that project from the ministry to the airport authority? And does that written policy include methodologies for monitoring and ensuring quality?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask the chief officer, because I think this is where you wanted to arrive at based on your line of questioning. I'll ask the chief officer to go through the procedure that took place with the Cayman Island Airport Authority improvements. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, so the process started back in 2013, whereby cabinet guidance was issued that informed a strategic outline case that was approved by cabinet. This case provided the cabinet approval not only of the strategic outline case, but then to actually go out to RFP for the outline business case. That was completed. Once the outline business case was completed, and that showed the way forward and how to move forward with the actual redevelopment of Oriya.
Mr. Chairman, not to interrupt the chief officer, but can you identify who is doing each of those activities as you name them out?
So, Mr. Chairman, the strategic outline case was done in-house by the minister responsible, being this ministry, and in working with the Public Works Department as well, the Major Projects Office, did the strategic outline case. Then we went out for RFP. Again, the ministry, the Major Projects Office, and a steering committee was put together. So we went out for RFP for the actual outline business case. That was completed. Then we went out for design RFP. Once that was completed, we went out for the RFP for the actual construction project. So at each stage of this, the steering group was involved, which compiled of the ministry and the Major Projects Office, and the Airport Authority. And actually, in the beginning, I think the Department of Environment was actually a part of it as well. Yeah, not on the steering committee.
And all of those that you just lined out was all spearheaded and done by the ministry, not the airport authority.
Mr. Chairman, it was done by a project steering committee that included the airport authority, the ministry, and the major projects office.
Who did the steering committee report to? The airport authority or the ministry?
Mr. Chairman, I was actually, as chief officer, the chairman of the steering committee, and the steering committee reported into the board of the Cayman Islands Airport Authority. Mr. Chairman, just a follow-up on that, as a member of the Airport Authority board, I reported in to the board and gave updates as well.
Mr. Chairman. Oh, someone else?
Member for North East End.
Mr. Chairman, I listen quite attentively to that. I wonder if the obvious question then is, we know the Airports Authority has gone long over its budgeted amount that was approved by Cabinet for that project. The Auditor General report is public, isn't it? Yeah. How then did the contractors get authorization to overspend? How would that have been communicated to the contractors, considering not overspend, but to do work that would ultimately make us be in an overspend position? Because that project, in essence, is a Cabinet's project. And we know the role of Cabinet in relation to authorities. Do you need me to read it? Or okay.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for the question. If I could just have some time, we're asking the CEO to set up the order of what happened to answer his question properly. CEO.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I can respond to a comment, but I'll state that I started out as the chairman of the project steering committee, and then it moved to the CEO of the airport authority once the project had started its construction. So once the procurement was complete, and that was done, we had the contractor on board. Then the chairman passed to the CEO of the airport authority.
Good morning. Welcome to the committee. Ask for the sake of clarity if you state your name and your position and then answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Albert Anderson, CEO, Cayman Islands Airports Authority.
Member for Northside, could you repeat the question? Member for East End, my apologies.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman. My question was, since the public authority law prescribes that it is Cabinet whose job it is to decide on policy, and in the case of Airports Authority, there was a capital to be expended which Cabinet approved. Keeping in mind that anything any authority does is the property of the Cayman Islands government, and the Cayman Islands government is managed by cabinet. And the further responsibility of cabinet is to extend, to allow ministers responsible for public authority to directly issue strategic policy direction in writing to the chairperson of the board. That's a responsibility of cabinet. That's a role cabinet plays, not a responsibility, that's a role. We know that the Airports Authority, you see the method that is madness, the Airports Authority has overspent. My question is, how was that communicated to the contractors to do that extra work? Was that done through cabinet, through the minister, under direction, the role of cabinet?
Mr. Chairman, the process for any changes to the project, because any spend that was not in the original scope was instructed by change orders, normal project management process. So when those changes were arrived at, and they were arrived at for different reasons, some of them being a board decision that for a change of scope, and some of them due to perhaps things that may have been missing from the plan. Those changes would have been presented to myself, and depending on the value of those changes, the board had given me a certain amount that I was able to approve, and anything above that had to go to the board. So that's the process it went through. Any changes that were arrived at, and they didn't come all at once, so it wasn't, we were overspending by X amount, and that was one request. It was a number of changes, and they would go through that process for approval.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the minister will agree with me that the appropriation in this country and the expenditures are clearly, and the expenses and the expense are clearly laid out in the public management and finance law. And it's the remit of cabinet only. Even though the cabinet under section, is it section 11? My good friend from Cayman Brackies will make me remind me. Public management finance law, only cabinet section 11 can go 10% over, right? Of the appropriations. 11.5? Whichever it is. Somewhere around section 11 of the public management finance law. Certainly, the reports that are being are in the public domain and reported to this legislature, it appears like we are bordering on 50% over, and over the initial price that government approved, cabinet approved for the redevelopment of the airport. Are we saying that cabinet did not instruct the minister to expend those and to further come to this legislature to get approval for that expenditure?
So, through you, Mr. Chairman, I want to take my time and go through this. The country needed an upgrade to its airport. It has been successfully upgraded, and it has gone from being able to receive 500,000 passengers a year to 2.5 million. Now, the Leader of the Opposition has stated that there was a 50% overspend on the project, which we do not agree with that statement. Okay? If the politics of this is to paint that kind of picture, it is up for Public Accounts Committee, and it hasn't come before Public Accounts Committee yet. I think it'll be a good accounting of what really happened there, because there was not a 50% overspend. The method that the airport itself was built under was using cash flow from the passenger fee of people that go through the airport. The idea of all the approvals, as you were dealing with changes that had to be made, number one, and number two, improvements that were done as the project was going along, because the government found itself in a position that it could move forward with more improvements. Those changes that were done, improvements, were decided by a board that was appointed by cabinet.
Mr.
Member
Chairman,
from
I
North
don't-
Side, East End, sorry.
You can.
I'm just still confused.
That's all right. No problem.
Just
Sometimes we're like Siamese twins,
well,
joined at the
You're in
hip.
a different seat this time around.
Okay. Mr.
Can I just ask you to try to get to the root of the question, what you're trying to elicit? Because here we are, 40 minutes under one question.
But we already reached the root.
Okay.
It's just getting the tree cut down now. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that, sir. Mr. Chairman, I want to disagree with my good friend from Kimmenbrack. This is not politics. This is a responsibility that has been placed upon my shoulders. And I said to the government the other day, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And I wear one too. And it's heavier when the head is empty. Mr. Chairman, okay, it's not 50%. I will concede that, because the government knows best of how much it is. But certainly there will be negotiations on how much, whatever it is, and finally there will be a settled amount. The responsibility for the expense of public funds, whether it comes from passengers or it comes from some other means of coercive revenue, lies squarely with this legislature. And this legislature has enabled cabinet with certain extended responsibilities to spend that money on behalf of the people. It does not lie with any CEO, nor does it lie with any board member or chairman. That's the public funds. That's the people's money. And this legislature, in its infinite wisdom, gave cabinet, the political directorate of this country, the responsibility to go over the appropriations only by 10% per appropriation. And even then, that political directorate must come back to this legislature for subsequent approval. That is what the people have said to us. This is not politics. These are fundamental, basic democracy and accounting principles. No one is allowed to do that without the cabinet instructing. The cabinet, with unanimous vote, instructing, majority vote, whichever one we all use nowadays, instructing the minister with responsibility to instruct someone else to spend that money. That's how it works. This has nothing to do with politics, nor Arden McLean, nor any member in this house, including the member from the outside. I mean, official and then the independent member, not to disrespect him. The minister has no responsibility to do it without the stated instructions of cabinet. Not the governor, it's the political directorate. And that happens to be the 7 that sit in front here. Mr. Chairman, that is the problem that this side has. And that's not the only authority that is doing this, Mr. Chairman. It's others that will be coming to answer. What you think civil servants and authorities come here? They come here to get approval to spend the public funds through the cabinet and their respective ministers.
Member for Bodentown West, after which I'm going to put the question.
Well, mine is actually a series, and at least just through you, Mr. Chairman, to the minister responsible. Who are the members of the Tourism Advisory Council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank the member for the question. It's not appointed.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make one caveat. I have
him,
okay,
his question.
No, well, I am sorry, Mr. Chairman, just as a follow-up, because as per the tourism law of 1974-1995 revision, it says in section 6, subsection 1, there is hereby established a Tourism Advisory Council to be appointed by the governor on the first day of January in each year, and from time to time at his discretion, which shall consist of a chairman and not more than 8, not less than 6 members, who shall hold office at the end of each calendar year or at the pleasure of the governor. The reason I'm asking this question, Mr. Chairman, is that the tourism law also requires a hotel licensing board. I'm assuming that the hotel licensing board is appointed.
Is that a question? Or can I ask you to turn it into a question?
Sorry. Can the minister, okay, well, since the Tourism Advisory Council isn't appointed as required by law, can the minister tell us then if the current membership of the hotel licensing board is appointed as per required by law?
Mr. Chair, yes.
All those in favor of DAT?
Hold a second, Mr. Chairman, sorry. The issue that I'm having here, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to state it right now to make it much easier, is that we operate, this is a house of laws and regulations also. We have a tourism law that has been outstanding now for basically more than 20 years. And if you look back at the planning estimates for this upcoming budget, there is under the section that deals with legislative measures upcoming, it's listed for something to be changed. But I noticed it was also listed in several budgets going all the way back to pretty much in the early part, shortly after like 2010. So the question then, Mr. Chairman, is that since we're operating a law this old, when does the ministry or the minister intend to have this law updated? Because it's been in effect now, they're not following the law, and we need to understand when the law is going to be followed.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, thank the member for the question. And I want to thank him for his participation in helping with that law, because every member in the opposition side attended meetings that we have run over the last 12-month period. They were very instrumental in giving input. The leader of the opposition gave us input on some other issues that we were able to tweak in the new law. It is vested now with legal for drafting, and we have two documents. One is the report on tourism, which was approved to come and be laid, and the actual tourism law itself should be ready to come to the next sitting of the House. The question about the advisory council, I think the member is well aware of the effort and the work that has been put in to updating, because he is correct. It's a law that needed updating, and it was flagged. One of the changes and updates were input from the leader of the opposition and the advisory council. The way input is now derived is not in the new law.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say one other thing before we move. I have some questions on that we're on the aviation thing, on the apron, and maybe we can take them at a different place, because I saw a release in the papers where Cabinet was signing that 30 million, I think it was, for it. So I want to have some questions on that as to whether that's a cabinet project approved by Cabinet, or it is a civil aviation project that they went and raised money for. Because if it's still government funds, and who's going to give directives on that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we'll be happy to take the question when the line item comes up, but for the members to be aware that that contract was signed by Mr. Anderson, and he'll be here when it comes up.
And that was on behalf of Cabinet, right?
The project was approved by Cabinet and signed.
And the amounts. And when we reach it, can you all prepare yourselves to let us know? And I'm giving you some forewarn is forearm. Who's the entity that is doing the paving? That includes all and sundry now.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the forewarning, and we'll be happy to give him the answers when we get there.
Absolutely last question.
Just turning to the budget, Mr. Chairman, because this is a budget meeting. I noticed the forecasted amount is looking to move from 3.18 million for this ministry, or for this item in 2019 to 4 million in 2020 and 2021. I'm just curious as to what is the driving force as to where the increase is coming from, when we notice that most of the quantities have pretty much remained the same. So I'm just curious as to what's driving the increase.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the member for asking that question, because I really wanted to get this out. The driving force behind this is jobs in Cayman Brac. The issue of border control was under district administration, and to follow best practice continuity and comply with some of the laws for directive of power of arrest and firearms, they were consolidated under the director, and it's one entity now, and Cayman Brac reports to the director in Grand Cayman. So that whole amount was taken out of district administration's budget, and that reflects in the next DAT the issue of the policy of government to give structure and economic development in a sustainable way to Cayman Brac is being delivered through the creation into the budget of new positions there. And there had been positions that had been needed for years and years, and we were able to identify those and put them in. So that's the majority of the change.
Okay, so, sorry, Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, so it is the staff for CBC, because you said it was taken out, so if the cost was taken out, I'd have expected the ministry cost to reduce as it was there before. So is it that is being put in, or is it being taken out because the cost actually went up by close to $1 million? So I'm trying to understand if it went up or it was taken out. Sorry.
The cost was taken out of the next one, right? And but this one, this line item here is where the job positions were added. Yep.
All those in favor of DAT 1?
Mr. Chairman, with the greatest of respect, sir, it's what
Yes.
I wanted to put in a little caveat.
Okay.
I just want to reserve the right to table an FOI request if I so determine it necessary based on the answers I've been given here this morning. Thank you.
Those in favor of DAT 1, advice and support for the Minister for District Administration, Tourism and Transport for $4,001,067 in 2020 and $4,034,274 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. We move on now to DAT 2, Government Services in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, $8,363,057 in 2020, $8,481,917 in 2021. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Member for Georgetown Central.
through you, Mr. Chair, can the minister give us an outline of the layout of the money and a broad understandings for the listening audience as to what this is for?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I thank the member. DAT 2, Government Services in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, is tourism and business promotions, construction and maintenance of public facilities, preservation of materials, sites, historical significance, provision of child care and preschool services, and government services in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman.
Mr. Chair, through you, I understand that there are some difficulties with a shelter in Cayman Brac. Is any of these appropriations to assist in keeping them up to the necessary grade for hurricane purposes? Siemens.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, a shelter in Cayman Brac, a government shelter or a private shelter?
Well, Mr. Chair, through you again, I think if the government uses it, they also assist them with funding to keep it up to par. Am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm trying to ask him, you said shelter or shelters?
Shelters. Any one of them that is not up to par.
I want to thank him for that question because to my knowledge and to the credit of district administration and public works, every shelter is ready and was prepared for this season to the point where cots were there. The only shelter that I personally know about that has issues is the Seaman Center shelter, and the work is being done on that now. They have always had a very close relationship with government, but there has not been a request for any funds as there was not a need at this point for the repairs to be done. If the Seaman Society of Cayman Brac and Little Cayman did make a request. I can assure the member that I would speak to my colleague, the Minister for Education, and we would be most happy to assist in whatever way we could.
Mr. Chair, through you, in this allocation, I see that some of it is for paving and maintenance of roads. Can the minister say how they decide the process of which roads, which constituencies are selected? Because obviously we don't have an endless amount. Can you outline the decision-making process as to which roads are done? Because I think we all know in this room politics is being played as to whose constituency gets what, because we don't have district councils. So can you explain that process to me, please?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure about the politics that are being played. We have a very capable staff led by the district commissioner and deputy district commissioner, along with Public Works and the team there. They assess the need. They have two different programs for road work. One is, as we call it, the asphalt program, which was instituted again by the Minister for Education when she was the minister responsible for the Sister Islands of much needed infrastructural demand, which brought an asphalt plant there. That has been a continuing program from the time it was started, and every year primary roads are moved. I believe if you visit Cayman Brac, you have a comfortable feeling that east and west has been supplied with the roads and balanced on a need basis. There is a list of roads, I would say probably 10, 12 have already been identified of the program. So if you call DC, or Public Works can tell you where you are in the programs of the scheduling of the roads. We also have a responsibility there because of the Water Authority and going back over when the Water Authority lines come in. And then the secondary roads can be sand seal and done without the aid of the asphalt plant itself. We also have a program in Little Cayman where we send people to maintain the roads. Independent asphalt and equipment is on Little Cayman, and the road crew also goes down. Sometimes we fall a little behind, but hopefully some of the new staffing issues will sort those out.
Mr. Chair, I want to thank the minister for the answer, but respectfully, he hasn't answered it. I asked him, how do you make the assessment? There has to be a process to make sure that there's no influence in any other capacity. And I guess the follow-up question would be, who makes the decision as to which road is done?
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chairman, let me ask the CO to speak with the district commissioner because he's flown down from Cayman Brac, and the deputy chief officer responsible. So if you could just give me a minute.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in speaking with the district commissioner, we have a section of Public Works in Cayman Brac unique to district administration. They have a works manager that in consultation with the district commissioner puts forward and agrees the list of roads to be repaired or maintained depending on the need at the time, whether it's, as Minister has said, whether it's the overlay because of the Water Authority laying the lines, or just general road repairs that are required.
Mr. Chair, I want to welcome the District Commissioner from Cayman Brac, and it's a pleasure to have him as a fellow Cayman Bracer on island. Do you have some guidelines that maybe the District Commissioner can can refer to in respect to how you decide which one is needed?
Good morning, sir. Can I ask you if you, for the sake of completeness, if you would state your name and your position and before you answer the question?
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Ernest Scott, District Commissioner from Sister Islands. I think you were trying to find out the process that we go through to determine which roads are to be paved or maintained. Generally speaking, the works manager is responsible for that. It's done in consultation with the Deputy Chief Officer from the Ministry, responsible for Cayman Brac, with oversight from myself. And that could mean, that could be determined by a number of things, like, for example, is the road in an area where flooding is common? Is the road just simply in need of repair over and above another road, for example? It could even be guided by where do we have the equipment at the time. If we have equipment concentrated in the creek, naturally we would look at roads that might need repairs or attention in that area. Similarly, Spot Bay or West End or South Side or on the bluff.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I want to thank the District Commissioner for his answers, but just a few follow-ups. So would it be fair to say it's a personal decision based on the members you just highlighted, and as opposed to what any outline by policy guidelines say? Because I still asked if there was guidelines. You haven't referred that. You said when we think, or the members think, making them be subjective.
Yeah, well, the guidelines come from the ministry through to myself and my works manager, through the Deputy Chief Officer with responsibility for the Sister Islands. It's not a personal decision.
Thank you. Could you provide this committee with those guidelines?
Mr. Chairman, through you, is that something you're asking, like in writing or something? Again, I tried to explain that just now. What we look at priorities, like we look at where the greater need is, and the greater need could be determined by a number of things, as I tried to explain earlier.
Through you, Mr. Chair, all I'm just trying to find out is if that's a written document somewhere that this committee can be in possession of, or you can read from it, as opposed to your personal viewpoints, not personal viewpoints, but like my honorable member said, if it's not written, it's not a policy.
Mr. Chairman, through you, no, we don't have anything in writing that I could read from. But Mr. Chairman, through you, just by extension, it is something that we review on a regular basis. And again, the works are carried out based on priority needs.
Through you, Mr. Chair, when I have to clarify, when he said it is something we review, is he talking about the guidelines that he didn't have, or just review the roads? What is it when you say it's something we review?
Roads and priorities and where the greater need is. Because we might have a situation now in November where the greater need is somewhere on the bluff. Come January, the greater need might be in a completely different district. And again, we try to do the works based on the need.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I am allowed to just deal one other matter and not to do with the roads that's on this line item. Okay.
Member for East End.
Mr. Chairman, on that same vein, two questions. I wonder if the minister can tell us if all that equipment is still working and if it will ever be returned to Cayman, the paving equipment. And two, listening to the commissioner, it appears like road repairs are done on an ad hoc basis, so to speak, based on site and which has priority. there are certain protocols that has been established by NRA. I'm very aware of those, which put roads in a grade them by categories and then priority on their state of disrepair as to when they get repaired. That is, has anyone considered employing that in Kimon in order that I think it's very worthwhile to do.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I thank the Minister for the question. The first part is the equipment working? I believe that his knowledge of engineering would say as age comes maintenance and repairs. So we have done quite a few miles of road this year, but obviously there has been some maintenance along with that. But the answer is yes, it is functional, and yes, it is providing a service to the people. The other question, I think the district commissioner did a good job of talking about priorities. I can ask him or the deputy chief officer if they follow an NRA standard, but you are very familiar with Cayman Brac as well, and I think that you know that what started was the main roads, the North Road, the South Road, and the Bluff Road. And with the Water Authority coming now, there have been roads that were easily identified because of the Water Authority having to put their pipes in and the asphalt program having to come right behind it. But if you give me a minute, I'll get input from Deputy Chief Officer if there's actually an NRA. Do you know if there's an NRA?
I'm asking if any consideration has been made to employ the NRA developers. Mr. Chairman, it's not a matter of asking if it's being used. Obviously, it's not. If any consideration has been had to employ their methods of identifying repairs to road and whatnot, which they have different gradings as to their point of disrepair, and then put them on a list. Must be 1 to 5 or something like that, and 5 being the better road.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, the simple answer to the question is that policy is not implemented in Cayman Brac, but I think the leader of the opposition will agree that Cayman Brac has the best roads in the country.
Mr. Chairman, the best roads? What an understatement. The best of everything. Thanks to, in particular, the two of them in recent times and their control of all the governments.
Final question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if the minister could say whether the lack of a protocol, a process, particularly being documented, that does not cause us to be in a bit of a bind for potential audits as to the process, if there's no way to document how you decide to do that, because obviously there's necessary checks and balances, but if that's not in place, couldn't you be setting the ministry up for potential abuse of political maneuvering or the like?
Again, through you, Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for that. The policy that is followed is that government-owned roads are the ones that are asphalted. Again, that's colloquialism that we use in Cayman Brac talking about the asphalt. And if you have two roads that get asphalted, and then maybe one is skipped because it hadn't been turned over to government yet. We have a program now that is led by the Deputy Chief Officer that is changing the requirements for government to actually have access to the road itself before the program is implemented on that road. So from an audit standpoint, I believe that that would be the input that would be looked for, and that is certainly a public document, basically, of where the roads are, what has been put in.
All in favor of DAT 2, Government Services in Cayman
Mr.
Brac?
Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I had a question.
Oh,
Just on the Cayman
I'm
Brac,
for Newlands. Go ahead.
on the Cayman Brac swimming pool, is that expected to be completed within this upcoming budget period now? Because I've noticed that I think it's been noted on several budgets in the past. Just trying to understand why it's taking so long to complete.
All right. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, thank the member for the question. It should be. This has been a project that has been done in stages. I believe it's been an extremely worthwhile project. The pool itself was opened by the Prince when he was here, and the pool is now functional. The swim team from the BRAC practices there. There's a senior program that goes in there. It continues to be utilized. And now the second part of that that's actually budgeted now is changing rooms. What else you have there?
They're for finishing it this summer.
But what else? You exchange rooms and what else?
Restroom, storage.
A storage room,
And parking lot.
parking lot, and the restrooms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, because I know that the whole incentive behind this complex is to encourage sports tourism and so on. What initiatives are going to be attached to that now, so that we can start to encourage some sports tourism in the BRAC?
I believe if we gave you a list of programs, this summer, the Ministry for Sports ran programs there using the pool, sent coaches and a program development officer from here. There are international football games that take place in Cayman Brac. The CONCACAF games have been played there, BRAC Cup. Canada's played there, Haiti's played there, Puerto Rico's played there, Bermuda's played there. So the same teams that come to Cayman, they usually get part of that in Cayman Brac itself. One of the divisions will play there and then come down for the finals here. It's a twofold program that we're all extremely proud of because it's very useful for the community itself. On a daily basis, there are programs run there for the youth in the youth program that gets them to the point where they can travel to Cayman and abroad in different sports, basketball, football, swimming. There's now discussions about teams from Cayman taking advantage of opportunity and coming to Cayman Brac for weekends and longer to have meets and training sessions. There's discussion about U.S. teams coming down for longer periods of time and using the pool for practice. There seems to be a shortage of warm weather pools. So we believe that we're putting the assets in place. Again, between a ministry responsible for tourism, one representative, and the ministry responsible for sports, we think we have a good ministerial team together to take advantage of the opportunities that will present themselves once we have these assets that we can use to attract and improve the community itself.
All in favor of DAT 2, Government Services in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, $8,363,057 in 2020 and $8,481,917 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, the district commissioner and his team flew down this morning. Would it be possible for us to take all of the votes for Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, so that we could release him, that he could go back this afternoon on the flight he's booked on around 3?
I'm happy to do that, sir. Can you direct me to which other ones we need to look at? SIH 1 seems to be the next one. So we'll take questions on SI program, $75,000 in 2020, $75,000 in 2021. Are there any questions? Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Can the minister say, again, quite similar to the road decisions, can they outline the process upon which they decide which homes and which constituencies are dealt with?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, again, thank the member for the question. I'll ask the Deputy Chief Officer with responsibility for that to give the answer. You good? I'm going to switch you over with him. Oh, are you want to answer it? No. I think he's also about the board. Right, you just need to go through and explain the board and what they do. Yep.
Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the committee. Can you please state your name and your position for the record?
Jonathan Jackson, Deputy Chief Officer for Ministry of DATT. If you could repeat the question again, sir. To you, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I welcome the Deputy Chief Officer. The question was, how do you make the decision as to which homes are selected for home repairs? And if so...
Oh, this is different. No. This is a different. This is affordable homes.
Member, I think the questions you're asking would be more appropriate on a different heading. Okay.
But Chairman, if he wants to, we're happy to answer that, because that's a fabulous program that's helping a lot of people in Cayman Brac. If he wants an answer to it,
I'd leave it for you to decide whether to do it now or at the appropriate heading.
Chairman?
The affordable home. You're okay with affordable homes? Okay.
Okay. All in favor of SIH 1, Sister Islands Affordable Housing Program, $75,000 in 2020 and $75,000 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. The next one that I see here would be the TP 66, Sister Islands Home Repairs Assistance, for $250,000 in 2020 and $250,000 in 2021. Are there any questions?
Yes,
Member
Mr.
for
Chair.
Georgetown Central.
Thank you. I think this is be the appropriate place for that question now.
I agree with you, sir.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll ask the Deputy Chief Officer who oversees the program.
Mr. Chair, if the member can repeat the question.
Mr. Chair, through you, the question was, how is the selection process done as to which homes get the assistance? What are the guidelines? And also, do you have a record of how many homes have been assisted based on constituency? So in Cayman Brac East and Cayman Brac West and Little Cayman, do you have a breakdown of who and what location have been helped and what the guidelines are on who decides who gets help?
Mr. Chair, through you, there's a terms of reference that's been developed for this program. And the terms of reference refer to keeping the goal of dry, sanitary, and safe. And there's a chairperson, which is a deputy commissioner, that has been head of this program for many years. And with his members that assist him, they cover the needs of the community through those that are over age 60, and there's a long list to develop using the funding on an annual basis. and that analysis is ongoing, planned out each year. It's ongoing on a monthly basis. There's a needs assessment, and an incredible amount of repair work continues. So it's a very vibrant program. The Deputy Commissioner reports into me on a weekly basis, and we review all the cases on a weekly basis.
So do you have the breakdown of how many homes have been helped in the last amount of allocations of 2 years, and which constituencies numbers they were?
Mr. Chair, through you, we could provide it to you in writing. It's an average of about 25 houses repaired each year. Some years it'll increase. Some year, depending on the proximity of the funds. Some repairs are as low as $2,000. Some repairs are up to $10,000. So as you can appreciate, it has to be spread out over a 12-month period. But it is ongoing. It's weekly. There's serious need for it, and we address it on a weekly basis.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate that outline, but I want, just for the providing in writing, my key focus here is where and what constituency, which persons got help. Now, you don't have to tell me the name or the location, but what constituency they fell in. I want to know if, say for example, 80% of them was in one constituency as opposed to 20% in the other. And also, who's the membership that makes that decision with the district commissioner?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you, we could provide all of that in writing to the member.
Also with the guidelines as well. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Member for Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if the Honorable Minister could inform the House how we were able to increase it from $10,000 to more to assist the people of Kemanbra in the last few months.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Minister, for the question. Through you, Chair. When we were looking at more funding for Grand Cayman and for the very solid program that has been implemented in Cayman and the members, citizens that were helped in Cayman, the view was that we needed to find a way for some special situations in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman that fell outside of the $10,000 guideline. So based on circumstances that were beyond control, and we didn't have the ability, as an example, because it was more than the $10,000, we were able to move some funding to review some of these cases and help some of the people who fell outside of the program. So that's been in the last 3 months when we were able to identify the need and identify funding for it, and the program has started to work with some of these special needs.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, just one last follow-up in respect to the last question.
Go ahead, sir.
Is there a different amount that is allowed for assistance in Cayman Brac, like a cap in Cayman Brac, than there is in Grand Cayman? And if so, why is that?
I can tell you about the program in Cayman Brac. The program in Cayman Brac started because of need, and the way forward with it was when you looked at elderly people who were not safe, were not dry, and house was not sanitary. Instead of having to move them out of that house and move them into a social service rental property, it was deemed important for them as a quality of life issue to fix where they had been living in most cases all their life. So, number one, fix the roof so the house doesn't leak. Number two, fix the windows and the doors so it's safe. And number three, look at the bathroom facilities and the kitchen facilities to make sure sanitary. So that program worked well. And the $10,000 limit worked well, the age worked well, and we have a lot of successes. In Grand Cayman, the program that was set up falls outside of those guidelines. So we had a specific program that we had been doing. When the committee and the group in Grand Cayman identified a need, the need in Cayman Brac was also identified and realized that we weren't reaching that specific need. So the vote for Grand Cayman was separate than the vote for Cayman Brac for a very good reason, and that is because the expertise and the oversight developed for Grand Cayman was not the same oversight that you needed for local knowledge in Cayman Brac. So we wrapped that need into the same grouping of the program that was operating in Cayman Brac with success and moved forward with that.
Member for Bordentown West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you, and just, I guess, piggybacking on the question by my colleague from Georgetown Central, I think what we're trying to understand is, and if memory serves me right, I think when this vote did come up the last time in Finance Committee, we understand that there were some houses in Grand Cayman where in excess of maybe 50,000 or 75,000 were being spent on repairs. And normally there's this belief that things in Cayman Brac cost more than things in Grand Cayman. So we're curious as to why in some cases in Grand Cayman, 50, 60, 70,000 dollars is being spent on some homes, whereas in Cayman Brac, I mean, there's a limit of 10,000. I mean, is the housing code in Cayman Brac different, or is the LL in Cayman Brac different from what it is that we have in Grand Cayman?
Mr. Chairman, I'll do my best to answer it. I'm not familiar with the Grand Cayman program, but I would say that the difference in price would be the scoping of the work that's being done. So if a house in Grand Cayman is in further disrepair, and let's say it needs a completely new roof, and the committee in Grand Cayman has the ability to vote the funds to fix that new roof. I'm speculating here, okay? What we know about in Cayman Brac is that Hurricane Paloma damaged 95% of the structures in Cayman Brac. We also know that we worked extremely hard to put finances in place to rebuild those structures. So we have what I would say is newer repaired buildings, if I can caption it that way, that are 10, 12 years old since that repair. So we've been successful in identifying this need, a lot of times because this need hasn't been going on for 20 or 30 years. This has been something, I'll give you a specific example. A house was repaired after Paloma in the same way that it was built with Texture 111. It has wood lice in it now. The living room wall is down. It's not safe. So although that Texture 111 was put in after Hurricane Paloma, it needs to be repaired now. It's a $3,000 job. I can't speak to what happens in Grand Cayman, but I'm assuming it's a longer time period and the scoping is completely different.
Mr. Chair, through you, I do appreciate the minister's outline of the concept of the cap of 10,000 based on previous build. But are we making an assumption here by capping it at 10 that you don't have any housing problem in Cayman Brac that's going to be more than $10,000. Because that's what you're ultimately saying is because all of this rebuild before, that you don't suspect that there's going to be a Cayman Bracker who's in need that's going to have a problem that's more than $10,000. And Cayman Brackers can't be treated differently than those here in Grand Cayman.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know where that member has been in the last 5 minutes when I explained this. What I explained was that we had increased the funding so we could identify problems that arose over $10,000. I believe the Hansard will show that that's what was said. The minister asked a question talking about our success that we've had with the program and how we had built on the program, how we voted funds, and how we now have the availability for specific cases over $10,000 to be repaired. I say it again. That is correct. We have the ability to repair homes on a need basis over $10,000.
All in favor of TP 66, Sixter Islands Home Repair Assistance, $250,000 in 2020, $250,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Ayes have it. TP 86, Sister Islands Beaches and Community Cleanup Program, $400,000 in 2020, $400,000 in 2021. Are there any questions? Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can the minister say how many persons have been signing up for this program? And can you give an idea whether it's decreasing, increasing, maintaining its average?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the average number is 50, and that's where it's set, and that's been pretty stable through the year.
Is that, by the minister's interpretation or the department's interpretation, is that any indication that the economic boom that the country is facing in respect to reduction of unemployment, if the numbers are not going down, is it because it's not reaching Cayman Brac?
The reason that the program is not going down, Mr. Chairman, is twofold. Number one, this year, in this previous budget, there was an identified a need because of sargassum. So we actually had to make sure that we kept the number employed because of moving the sargassum off the beach. So this was part of the jobs availability. The other part of this program is that we have actually had people from Grand Cayman come to Cayman Brac to work in the program.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I apologize. One more question. Can he, if he's obviously know that there's persons coming from Grand Cayman, can you identify how many persons from Grand Cayman have come over to Cayman Brac to take part in this program that keeps the numbers exactly at where they're at?
I can certainly give the member the undertaking that I'll find out and get that for him. I don't really have it now, but certainly we will drill down in it. I also want to his question was if we had a concern about sustainability in the economy in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. I can assure him that we definitely have a concern about sustainability and the economy of Cayman Brac. That is why we have implemented more flights into Cayman Brac. That's why we are building 7 buildings in Cayman Brac. That's why we're redoing the district admin to provide more and better office space for the government workers that work there. That's the reason we have an initiative to move government jobs to Cayman Brac. That's why we continue to look at incentivizing people who want to come and build and live in Cayman Brac. And we also entertain developers and people who have interest in economic development. So we are very concerned about that, and we work on a daily basis to try to create a sustainable economy.
Mr. Chair, last question, and I thank you for your patience in respect to this. Kim Brack has a rather unique time schedule for their cleanup, not quite like Grand Cayman. If I understand correctly, it goes on for a longer period of time throughout the year as opposed to Grand Cayman that does specific like Christmas and summer and that's it?
Right.
Is that correct?
Again, I thank the member for the question. What we found this year is, again, the sargassum issue, which was a national issue, started early. And what had started as a program for road cleanup, beautification, then had to be expanded and more days had to be put into the program because of the beach cleanup and the need of what was happening.
Member for Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Honorable Minister. How many people exactly are employed, either temporary or full-time, in the Ministry of for District Administration?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, is that total or just in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman?
Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, total between full-time and then also temporary or contracted, like seasonal workers or whatever.
Separated.
Yeah.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, I just caveat this to the member that this moves up and down. It's approximately 180, which includes our intern program, okay? And then the road work program, beautification, sargassum, that is a part-time program, 50.
All in favor of TP 86, Sister Islands Beaches and Community Cleanup Program, $400,000 in 2020, $400,000 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. Turning now to page 18. The next one I see here, Cayman Brac EA 55, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman Roads. 1 million in 2020 and 1 million in 2021. Are there any questions? Member for East End.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the minister can tell us how many miles of road are left to be paved in Cayman Brac?
Yeah.
Minister for District Administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can the Leader of the Opposition ask that question again, please?
Mr. Chairman, the minister told me, asked me to confirm a while ago that Cayman Brac had the best roads, and I appreciate that they do. They have very good infrastructure, and I'm not jealous of them. I'm just wondering how much more there is to be done. That's all.
Mr. Chairman, the member asked that question in the last Finance Committee, and the answer that he got was 300 miles of road. Oh, between 250 and 300. So I want to, the question that you have is, are we going to build more roads, or are we repairing those roads?
I don't know which, because I mean, you really stumped me now, because this country, Grand Cayman, has little over 500 miles. And Cayman got 300? Really? We building out over the water one? Because there was a finite land mass there. Whichever you can answer. I'm not trying to be troublesome or anything. It's just every year we have $1 million for paving of roads, and we have to run out of roads to pave.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask the Deputy Chief Officer. He has a list here. Looks like he was prepared for the question.
Mr. Chairman, through you, sir, we've been in the phase of secondary road paving. Prior to this, all the primary roads have been paved. The secondary road pavings are what you would call subdivision roads. And obviously we're having complexity with it because some are private, some are public, and we're not paving the private ones. We actually have a terms of reference that shifts that into where the owner can offer up the road through Lands and Survey, offer up to the Crown. So that's a complex process, obviously. And it's ongoing. That's added to the admin of paving roads. So we have that as a sidebar, but going forward, there is the ongoing secondary roads that are being paved, and there's the Water Authority pipeline that will go through the entire Kimmenbrock Island roads that would also have to be asphalted over sectionally as they put their pipeline underground. In addition, sir, Little Cayman is often forgotten, but there's miles and miles of roads there as well, sand sealed, repaired, etc.
Mr. Chairman, I understand the main arterials have been paved, and secondary roads are subdivisions and the like. That is what is being determined in Kimmenbrock, and I'm not going to refer negatively to Kimmenbrock in that regard. However, when the time comes for the Minister for Roads, and then Grand Cayman is going to have to get the same treatment, wherein that process is a convoluted one to turn it over to the government as a public road and whatnot in these subdivisions. But we here, and I suspect that is what is happening in Kimmenbrock, where we do not ensure that these subdivision roads are built up to minimum standards, and within a few years, then we have to go in and repair them. That is true here in Grand Cayman, but we are reluctant to go in and pave them, thus leaving our residents without the nice asphaltic roads But that will come when the minister comes, because we're going to have to move into that direction, Cayman. I applaud the minister for the deputy premier and the minister for education for ensuring that their monies are spent in those subdivisions. Now I understand why you could have 300 miles. Somebody up there could do a subdivision with 30 miles of road right inside there. Thank you.
Member for Buttontown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just through you to the minister. I noticed Cayman Brac population has increased. When they did the census back in 1999, Cayman Brac population was 1,937, and per ESO stats at the end of 2018, it has increased to 2,006, which is an increase of 69 persons over the last 20 years, or well, 19 years. The question overall is there an overall development plan for the Sister Islands? And when you also consider that the population has decreased since 2010, I'm trying to wonder if the government has a holistic plan or a strategic plan with regards to the development of Cayman Brac and what it is that we can do to ensure that Cayman Brac, I guess, realizes its full potential.
Through your chair, Mr. Chairman, thank you, the member. We, in the last 6 months, had a study done, Sister Islands Medium-Term Strategic Strategy. We did a presentation to the governor and caucus on the strategy itself, and sorry, it's more than 6 months ago. Some of the projects and programs that came out of this document was the building of the new buildings for district administration. They talked about needs to build on. One of the reasons for some back office work not moving to Cayman Brac was the need for office space itself, and the expanded office space for the government, because the government has the ability to move more back office jobs, but when it was analyzed, there was no space to move them to. In the next 6 months, that problem will be solved. They identified some other initiatives as far as the development incentive programs to get developers to come in, and back office financial work being done. So there is a list of programs that we have been implementing. I think you're very familiar with the strategy that we employed when we changed the air service to make it easier for people to get there. We've had a 20% increase in arrivals, and hotel occupancy rates have now moved into the high 80% bracket, which they'd never been before. We're very pleased that the Alexander will be opening back in December, and we see some other movement as far as interest from developers and some financial industry interest. Also, in my contribution to the throne speech, I talked about the company registry has had an office, they've sent furniture over, and in a short period of time they're going to be advertising for back office jobs in Cayman Brac as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just thanks to the minister for that response. I would very much like, if it's possible, if the minister can share with us that plan. And the reason why I'm saying this, Mr. Chairman, is that I do have a fundamental problem with sometimes people in Grand Cayman looking at Cayman Brac as if though they're some distant red-headed cousin or something, when in fact Cayman Brac, in terms of their citizens and what it is that they're provided to this country thus far. So I would very much like to see that. Very much. Thanks.
Very happy to provide that.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, lest anyone think that I was trying to be unhelpful with Cayman Brac, let me, for the avoidance of doubt, let me clear the air here. In 2009, I campaigned in Cayman Brac for the deputy premier, and one of the plans that I left when I left the immediate office, which I made known to the people of Cayman Brac, was that we were going to bring in private contractors and put water mains throughout Cayman Brac, and then subsequently pave all of the main arterials. You remember that? It has taken much longer than I had anticipated. It was going to be 18 months. It is now 10 years later, and we still not finish it up. So I'm not jealous or anything. I just think that my approach would have been much different, because I always believe that if you build it, the people will come. You remember, that was my approach.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor of EA 55 at Cayman Brac and Little Cayman Roads, $1 million in 2020, $1 million in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. EA 60, Cayman Brac Bluff Playfield, $500,000 in 2020, $0 in 2021. Are there any questions? There are no questions. All in favor of EA 60, Cayman Brac Bluff Playfield for $500,000 in 2020 and $0 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. Cemetery EA 95, Cemetery Vaults, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, $50,000 in 2020, $50,000 2021. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can the minister say whether there's an updated report as to the availability based on humans or the residents of Cayman Brac, and that the availability of cemetery vaults will meet the demand on projections of human life in Cayman Brac? Or is there any need for finding of more locations?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for the question. Just confirm with the district commissioner and the deputy chief officer responsible. They confirm that there is cemetery space and vaults available in each cemetery in Cayman Brac. There are still vaults available in Little Cayman, but there's going to be a need, and they're reviewing what the options are now.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can the minister say then, does the provisions in here will adequately meet the need to address if there is an increase? Because obviously you want to put the money in the budget. If you think there's a potential chance, well, you need another 50 or what have you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we believe that this 50,000 is what is needed.
All in favor of EA 95, Cemetery Vaults, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, $50,000 in 2020, $50,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. EA 125, Cayman Brac Emergency Shelter for $500,000 in 2020, $250,000 in 2021. Are there any questions? Member for Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Honorable Minister. What is the intended capacity for that emergency shelter?
Ask the Deputy Chief Officer to answer that.
Mr. Chairman, through you, 1,000.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you and back to the Honorable Minister. Considering that during Hurricane Ivan, well, during the scare, a lot of people from Grand Cayman left and went to Cayman Brac looking, I guess, shelter stuff for the kids and everything. Is there a possibility that we can also look at maybe increasing the size as a kind of alternative also for people in Grand Cayman in the event, or God forbid, something else happens, in terms of having more shelter if needs be, if people in Grand Cayman decide to go there?
Mr. Chairman, if the member is recognizing a need and thinking that we should put more money in this budget, we could commit to you to expand that in this 2-year budget very happily.
And Mr. Chairman, we'll happily support that. Again, considering, like I said, what had happened, we don't want, the cycle is that we're, God forbid, again, overdue for something major. We also do have to start thinking of alternative sites for our people in Grand Cayman. Like I said, if God forbid something does happen, so I'd be more than happy to entertain that.
So, Mr. Chairman, is that a recommendation that you want in this budget? And if you could give me an amount, 1, 2, 3 million?
Well, that will depends on, it depends on the study and everything else. I don't pull numbers, pluck them out of here, but I think it's something definitely worth looking at. And at a minimum, I think even a couple $100,000 to even look at exploring the idea even further in terms of the architectural and everything else, yeah. So I would support a couple $100,000, yes.
Member from Minister.
Mr. Chairman, all I can say is good come to those who wait, because in 1999 I had the same vision that the member just expressed, and I was told from one end of this island to the next that I was building Hotel Hilton on Cayman Brac. So I'm glad to hear that now that it can be extended to help the citizens, my brothers and sisters in Grand Cayman, the Hilton is not a name that I can expect to hear when we get the money to build it. I could say much more.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't call it Hilton. What was we were calling it? Hyatt.
Hotel.
Mr. Chairman, that was in jest, and I didn't. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if we can find out the total cost of this hurricane shelter.
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the leader, opposition, the deputy chief officer says he can get a summary put together for you. Yeah. You want approximate? Just
Approximate is fine.
Rough estimate around 6 million.
Would that be 60,000 per occupant?
Okay.
Really? We know, what's that, 60,000 per occupant? 6 million? 1,000 people? I trust everybody sees where I'm going, right? We're budgeting 2 million in here for another one that don't go hold half that amount.
I am reliably informed that that's $6,000 per person.
$6,000 per person. and we're building other shelters. Yeah, that's my mistake. And we're building other shelters that doesn't hold half the amount and cost the same thing. Therein lies the problem and the concern that as a representative I have, wherein we are, I don't know whether it's abuse or misappropriation or mismanagement. It is some miss.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, forgive me, but maybe the minister could address the concern that was highlighted, because it's a pretty serious one. Is there a difference in building costs in Cayman Brac than Grand Cayman? Why we having something practically based on the outline that is going to be double the cost elsewhere in a different part of the country? So is the cost per area changing? I mean, it's a serious, legitimate question. And I was hoping that you could have some input into why one shelter building X amount costs so much, another shelter doing half the amount of persons involved. Is it because of the structured type? Is it because of metal or cement? Because we have to rationalize why this money is being spent. That's what we're here today. So we can't just be silent. We have to answer the question.
I can only, through you, Mr. Chairman, thank the member for the question. This project has been driven through two different ministers, and I believe both of the ministers were prudent and interested and worked extremely hard on the project. That was, I think you're giving us a huge compliment, because it was half the price in Cayman Brac. I'll receive it on behalf of both the ministers responsible. Thank you for that. I don't know, I have no way of saying anything about what takes place in Grand Cayman and the shelter.
All in favor of EA 125 Cayman Brac Emergency Shelter for $500,000 in 2020 and $250,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. EA 139 Little Cayman Boat Launch Ramp, $250,000 in 2020, $250,000 in 2021. Are there any questions? There are no questions. All in favor of EA.
I just want
Member for East End.
how many boat ramps are building? That's all. 2. Okay.
Member for Savannah.
This is just an observation, Mr. Chairman. As you approach lunchtime, I see all of those fine gentlemen sitting out there. Why don't you release them so they can go take a break and come back?
I was hoping we could just finish this.
The ladies,
we could all break.
but just release the people.
Yep. I mean, they're welcome to leave for, so we can, and then we'll finish up the rest of the Cayman Brac budget, then take the break.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, while on this topic, just out of curiosity, I mean, how much does a comparable, can the minister or any of the technocrats give us an idea roughly how much other boat ramps cost elsewhere, like more recently, like Bordentown? I mean, this is $250,000 for one boat ramp. The question is, how does that compare to other boat? Well, 2, so that's $125,000. So how much does that? How does that compare to other areas?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, you'd really have to scope the ramp itself, because these ramps are different. This is one is on the south side of Little Cayman, and it's for dropping a boat on a trailer, a smaller boat. The one on the north side is a provision for safety and availability, because there's no access on the north side for getting emergency people ashore. And that's Bloody Bay Wall, Jackson Point, McCoy's, all the way along there, where there's, every day probably 12 or 13 dive boats. So this is two different projects, two different needs, and two different ramps that are going to satisfy the need. Happy to have a conversation about different ramps and what costing is, but I don't think anybody can answer that until you get the scoping of what you're looking at.
All in favor of EA 139, Little Cayman Boat Launch Ramp for $250,000 in 2020 and $250,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. EA 157, Cayman Turtle Conservation Center, Cayman Brac Facility, $1 million in 2020, $1 million in 2021. Are there any questions? Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am assuming this is the last line item for Cayman Brac.
It is.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank all the hard-working civil servants in Cayman Brac for coming over, and I wish you safe travels back home. As you know, I'm a fellow Cayman Bracker, so sending all the love to the Brackers back home, and thank you for being here this afternoon.
Member for Bordentown West.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just through you, just to better understand this, is this like the equivalent of a turtle farm that we're building in Cayman Brac? As a kind of tourist attraction, I'm just trying to understand what it is.
Mr. Chairman, I can't tell the member thanks enough for asking that question. I was so worried that nobody was going to ask so we could explain. We're extremely excited about building a turtle center facility in Cayman Brac. We have the Chief Executive Officer of Turtle Center here. I would invite him to come and explain not only the need, but the opportunity of what this means for tourism, what it means for research, and what it means for redundancy. So I'll ask Mr. Adams to come.
Mr. Chairman, while he comes, he can prepare his mind for this one as well. How does this augur? How does this augur with all the troubles we have been having with the other one and this global conservation and movement that has been going on and beating us up and whatnot? Has this been considered that now we're going to expand, not only expand, but at a different location?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to ask the Leader of the Opposition, we're quite happy to spend a lot of time answering that because I think that's a very valid question, but if we're going to spend another 15, 20 minutes, maybe it would be good to release who is here for lunch.
What I would say to the rest of you that are just sitting here is if you could be back here by 2:15, I'll release you at this time, and let's be prepared to go at 2:15. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to thank the District Commissioner from Cayman Brac and his team that flew down this morning. I assume they're released that they can fly back to Brac.
Unless there are any questions relating to this head that we're appropriation that they would need to answer, I'd be hesitant to do so and not have them here to answer anything.
I think that between the Chief Officer and Mr. Adam, that whatever comes up, we could answer. Okay?
Okay.
So, again, I want to thank him for coming down this morning and thank him for his contribution while he was here.
And I thank you, too, for your testimony as well this morning. Mr. Chairman, please state your name and your position for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Timothy Adam, Chief Executive Officer, Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center Limited. Mr. Chairman, as I understand the question I'm about to answer, is the overall purpose of the facility in Cayman Brac. The facility in Cayman Brac will most likely be titled the Cayman Brac Turtle Restoration Center. Sorry, the Cayman Brac Turtle Conservation and Restoration Center, or something along those lines. Mr. Chairman, as is the case for the facility in Grand Cayman, it has a dual purpose. of being involved in conservation and education, primarily of marine turtles, and also in so doing, it also becomes a very important tourist attraction, as occurred here in Grand Cayman. What we would like to point out with the facility in Cayman Brac, in order to support the conservation aims of it, there will also be a portion of a lab and certain tanks for the husbandry of the turtles in Grand Cayman, because a big part of it is aimed at the hawksbill turtle species. If one takes a look, Mr. Chairman, at the count of nests of hawksbills nesting in the Cayman Islands, it is very low. And it has been very low for a number of years. Just from memory, if one looks at Grand Cayman, there would probably have been, based on the 2018 figures, no hawksbill nesting in Grand Cayman, or so, for a number of years, more than 1 year. I think it's probably of the order of 4 or 5 years. I don't have the 2019 figures available yet, and that we will hope to get by, in the new year from the Department of Environment, who does this monitoring. We are blessed with a small number of nests, as I understand it, in Cayman Brac in 2018, and in Little Cayman there were something less than 20 nests of hawksbill turtles. The hawksbill turtle in the Cayman Islands needs help. And the methodology that we propose to apply to that will involve a part of a facility here in Grand Cayman, part of a facility in Cayman Brac, in order to help that population to recover. Now, there's also in Cayman Brac, the nesting of green turtles, Mr. Chairman, is also very low. And we believe there are opportunities to expand or to grow the population of green turtles nesting in Cayman Brac as well. So the facility in Cayman Brac will actually be housing both green turtles and ultimately also housing hawksbill turtles that we are husbanding into a stage of life at which they are much less susceptible to predation upon their being released. But all of the turtles that are located in the facility in Cayman Brac will be turtles ultimately destined for release into the wild, and thereby augmenting the wild population.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know why I open my mouth here, but it's incumbent upon me to set the record straight. I can't allow the director of Turtle Farm to come here and talk about where the public is listening and talk about the nesting provisions in this country. Nesting for turtle needs help, especially hawksbill. I have been talking about this. I have been begging for years to have higher enforcement on this. And the directors now coming here and saying that it needs help. It needed help a long time ago, not only in Grand Cayman, but it also needed help in Little Cayman and Cayman Brac because of poaching. That is the problem with it. It has been an abject failure on how we have managed the natural resources in this country, and that one in particular. Poaching has caused it. So let's not try to diminish and try to make the public believe that this is a natural occurrence. It is not. It comes from poaching by people. And I trust
that whatever goes on in Kimon-Brack will not turn into another abject failure that we are constantly having to put money into the turtle farm.
Member, we need a question.
Mr. Speaker, it's not a question. In his response, he went quite a distance about what is needed. My question was, how will this augur, or how will this be viewed by all the people all over the world that is objecting to us having a turtle farm for the purposes that we have it? Why are we expanding, and why in Kimon-Brack? And he is saying that they need help. It's been needing help because of the abject failure of our enforcement.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to understand the way the Leader of the Opposition is framing this question. Number one, what he should be doing is thanking the turtle farm for the research that's being done, for supporting green turtle, for getting the population back up, and clearly understanding that two wrongs don't make a right. So if you don't do something like this to replenish the herd, you're going to lose them completely. The enforcement arm of this country does not fall under the turtle farm, and it doesn't fall under this ministry. So help and be productive when you ask questions or make comments for the turtle farm. The Turtle Center. The Turtle Center is accepted globally as one of the most well-known and successful research programs in the world. It continues to move from strength to strength. And moving and creating redundancy and improving the research that's being done on a different species in Cayman-Brac, I think the opposition leader will agree, is a win for the country.
Mr. Chairman, the minister's suggesting, the deputy minister's suggesting that I'm not being helpful. Neither is the turtle farm. In the absence of proper enforcement, all the turtle farm is going to be doing is putting more turtles in there to be poached. That's all they're doing, increasing the amounts that can be poached. And that is my argument. We are not going to get any better in Grand Cayman, much less Kimon-Brac and Little Cayman, when the turtles in the wild is being poached and there is no coordination between the production of turtles to be let back into the wild, which will hopefully come back here and lay, when the enforcement is not available to stop people from poaching them. That is my argument, and I stand by that, and I have been arguing that for the last 20 years, and no one is listening. Now, our response to it for the poaching and the absence of turtles in the wild is to produce more so people can catch them. That is asinine.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the Leader of the Opposition will admit that this line item in this budget has nothing to do with enforcement. When the line item comes that has to do with enforcement, that's when we need to have the discussion. This is a proactive approach of trying to increase the turtle population.
Mr. Chairman, obviously the Deputy Premier, with all due respect to him, is not listening to me. He's not hearing what I'm saying. I'm saying all we are doing is producing turtles to be let go in the wild. I noticed them letting them go in the wild, and there is no enforcement. It is putting the cart before the horse. It makes absolutely no sense to put more into the wild and expend monies, good monies, in hatcheries to put turtles in the wild when we're not going to protect them.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
I had a member for Northside who was asking.
To you, Mr. Chairman, can the minister say what is the income and expenditure projection for this project and how long it's going to take to recover this $1 million investment?
I'll ask the CEO to answer that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, before I lose track of the questions to be addressed, if I may first respond to the question, which I will take it from the point of view of how does Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center Limited, and how does this
Mr. Chairman, that has nothing to do with the question I asked. I asked a simple question. You tell us to be specific. I expect answers to be specific. My question is, what is the income and expenditure projected for this project and how long it is going to take to recover the $1 million?
That's a question we need to focus on now.
Mr. Chairman, can I explain? The value of a turtle in the wild has been estimated.
Mr. Chairman, it has nothing to do with the value of the turtle in the wild.
Okay.
Are you telling me you have this project put together, you don't know what income and expenditure is going to be and how long we can take to get the $1 million back?
Mr. Chairman, if I may be permitted to answer, sir. The model that is being adopted for the center in Cayman Brac that we are aiming to follow is a model that has been utilized in other areas where there is not a fee charged for admission and there is not a fee charged for turtles released from that center. Instead, it is donation, sponsorship, and other benevolent sources of funding that assist toward the end of producing the outcomes that we're looking for. And may I explain the outcome in the context of Cayman Turtle Conservation Education Center Limited, which is a model that exhibits why this is so important, because we firmly believe, and I believe this honorable Finance Committee would agree, that we should be engaged in evidence-based policy making and evidence-based decision making. The evidence is that because of what we have done over the years in Grand Cayman has resulted in the turtle nesting population of green turtles that we have in Grand Cayman today, where we started in 1999, according to the records, of something around between 1 and 5 nests of green turtles, and by 2017 that figure had climbed to over 200. And I come back to the value. We're talking about delivery of value. In addition to the values we have of preserving the turtles in the wild, we're also providing for the island a tourist attraction, not just located at Northwest Point, but at every point at which visitors as well as residents can enjoy seeing a turtle in the wild. And it is known that megafauna, such as marine turtles, is a great attractor of people to countries that depend upon tourism for part of their income, such that it is estimated a turtle in the wild, according to published peer-reviewed papers, is worth something between $30,000 and $35,000 United States dollars. So the measurement as to value of this project in Cayman Brac is a measure that one would have to look at its value in attracting visitors to Cayman Brac, in attracting visitors to participate in diving or snorkeling or other activities that will be stimulated by having this type of megafauna increasing in population in Cayman Brac and hopefully also in Grand Cayman, and even being able to perhaps help in Little Cayman as well. Therefore, there is not a model of charging for admission which applies to the location here. There is not a model for, and I want to assure, there's not a model that the facility in Cayman Brac will do the other very major conservation work we do, that is keeping wild turtles in the wild by producing meat and thereby avoiding poaching. So the data that are available today are because of what we did in Grand Cayman, The DNA study done by Department of Environment together with University of Barcelona, University of Exeter, funded by the Darwin Initiative, 90% of the nesting green turtle population in Cayman are DNA proven to be related to the releases we've done over the years. And the other study that was done under the Darwin Initiative was socioeconomic of turtle meat consumption. When you plug in the figures for current demand, if we stop producing turtle meat, and this is a little known fact, Mr. Chairman, if we stop producing turtle meat, the data suggests in the wild we have a population for maybe another 3 months to 9 months to a year, and then it'll be wiped out by poaching. The fact of the matter is, coming back to the concern of poaching, poaching is definitely one of the, the prevention of poaching is one of the things that is vital for conservation. Nesting habitat is another thing, but population augmentation has been proven by the evidence to be a tremendous, tremendous impact on the wild turtle population in and around our islands, and that's what we intend to continue in the facility in Cayman Brac. I hope that helps, sir.
Mr. Chairman, that was totally helpless and it didn't answer my question. But let me ask you, Mr. Chairman, was a business case done for this investment under the procurement law?
Not a question which I have the answer to in front of me, sir.
Was,
for you
Mr.
to direct
Minister,
the question through me to the Minister.
was a business case done for this investment under the terms and conditions of the procurement law?
Mr. Chairman, that is precisely the point at which you're at now. We're at a point of hiring architects to develop the business case. For me to,
Mr. Chairman,
my
question was not addressed to the CEO of the Turtle Farm. It was addressed to the Minister. The question is, was a business plan done as is per the requirement of the procurement law before you get any design or anything else?
Right.
Yes or no?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the business case is in progress. The Deputy Chief Officer is here, and they're at the architectural stage now.
So,
but I want to ask him this question. Is your point that you are against this vote for this to be built in Cayman Brac?
I just want to know it's done properly. Remember the problem we have with the current turtle farm, and we're subsidizing that every year, $9–10 million, and we got 200,000 people passing through it. Question to you, Mr. Chairman. How, to the Minister through you, how was the $1 million obtained? Was it just a number you pulled out of the hat and said we'll put $1 million in? You haven't done a business case. You don't know what the income and expenditure is. How you get to the $1 million?
The start of the business case, okay, was the square footage that was needed, the type of building that we built, bricks and mortar, wood, frame, a science lab, and what else? And a display room. Okay, that's the start.
Okay.
Now, the next part of that has to be the architectural stage. But the estimate that was derived from this was put into the budget because your colleague has talked earlier about wanting to see the sustainable development medium-term plan for Cayman Brac. This is part of how we put a product in place to attract people and get sustainable development. And if your questioning here today is making sure we are doing it right, I applaud you. But if your questioning here today is that you have a problem with us trying to develop the infrastructure of Cayman Brac, I'm not happy.
But Mr. Chairman, I'm not here to make the Minister happy or sad. I am here to ascertain whether this $1 million that's in the budget makes any sense or not. Because the problem I have with the answers I've gotten so far is this could wind up to be $4 or $5 million. If the Minister says that there is no need for a proper business plan, there's no need to project anything, because it is only designed to develop the infrastructure of Cayman Brac for tourism purposes and for putting turtle back in the wild, and there's no intention of managing the project in order to produce income, then that's the short answer.
Mr. Chairman, we have given information as we have it available to us. We've explained where we are with the business case. The Deputy Chief Officer with the responsibility and the CEO of the Turtle Farm have explained the need and the justification for it. I've taken the time to explain from a tourism standpoint and from a sustainable economy standpoint why we believe it is important to the BRAC. We are comfortable that the money that we put into the budget, we have a reason why that was there, and we've just explained it based on square footage. So I hope that that helps in some way.
Marginal, Mr. Chairman, through you.
Okay.
Is the $1 million in the budget adequate to build the facility that is going to be designed for the BRAC?
Yes.
I'm going to propose that we take the lunch break at this point in time. It is
Yeah, that's about, give me
1:30,
time.
and we come back and we can finish the questioning on
We can
this.
take the vote.
Okay.
Let's take the vote.
No, number of,
What, they're not ready?
we've got a number of other questions, sir.
Can we take the vote? No? Okay, okay.
Okay, it is now 1:30. Let's come back at 2:30.